Now, later on today, the Premier League clubs in Britain will meet to decide whether they can proceed to play games behind closed doors. 14 clubs need to vote for it to provide the majority required. There are mixed views. People like Frank Lampard, for example, a very respected football man, manager and coach of Chelsea, Sergio Aguero and others have expressed serious reservations about going back to play football in the circumstances we find ourselves with COVID-19. However, at the weekend, the Bundesliga restarted behind closed doors, and on Saturday and Sunday there were games. And it's a pleasure now to welcome back to the stand Didi Hamann. Didi, of course, played for Liverpool, Bayern Munich, Newcastle, Manchester City, and he also played for Germany. Didi, it's good to hear you well and in good form. You had the experience at the weekend. Before I ask you about how the weekend went, can I ask you about the debate that I assume took place in Germany as to whether or not to go ahead as you did at the weekend? Were there people for and against?
Yeah, of course. And obviously we go back a few weeks now because I think the fundamental numbers, newly infected cases, the R rate,
yes,
is very important. And obviously the politics here, I've got to say, our Chancellor, our Prime Minister, Ms. Merkel and her government, they've done a brilliant job in containing the virus.
Yes.
And putting restrictions into place probably before most other countries. And obviously we had these horrific pictures of Bergamo where the army had to come in to bring the dead bodies out. So, and we were just fortunate in a way as well that we didn't really have any or too many hotspots here. So, a few weeks ago, it looked like the virus can be contained and the restrictions are working. So the DFL and politics, the government got together and they said, if we put a proposal together, what are we going to do? Would you have a look at it? And they said, yes, do that. And we will check it, whether it will be or we deem it safe to play. So the DFL put a very structured and into little details. They put a proposal together for the government. They had a look and they said, well, if you do that, then we have another meeting with all the state ministers, because in a federal government, obviously a lot depends on the states. They can decide what they want to do.
Yes.
And they had a look a few weeks back and they said, yeah, it's safe to play, probably second half of May. So all the tests then started when the teams, they started training in big groups again 2 weeks ago. They get tested 2-3 times. They had to go into quarantine a week before the first game. So they've all been in a hotel now before the first game. The last game is tonight, Bremen against Leverkusen. But after the games this weekend, they go home. But the family members get tested as well. So they try to eliminate any opportunity that people can get infected. And the biggest thing is that obviously we had a case in the championship in Dresden where the team had to go into quarantine. They couldn't trace where these players got infected. And then the whole team has to go into quarantine. If a player turns up this week and he's positive, only this player will have to go if you can trace back who infected him or where it came from. And there was opposition. There was a poll in the paper this week that over 50% were opposed to football being played again. But the matter of fact is, what we know now of the virus, I think we've got to live with it till we find a vaccine.
Yes.
And it's not any safer in 2 weeks' time or in 6 months' time. Now the decision or the question should we play it all? Or should we open the restaurants? Or should we open the schools at all? And to put the whole nation or the whole of Europe or the whole of the world into lockdown for another 6 months is simply not an option. But I think, again, politics has to do their job. And if the figures of newly infected cases don't back it up, then there could be a problem in certain countries, and England is certainly one of them.
Yes, of course it is, and England is the worst in Europe for fatalities and indeed for infections. Just to pause for a moment to reflect on how Germany managed this. One of the reasons being, of course, massive testing capacity in the a great laboratory system with loads of capacity. You had the reagent, and as you say, it was done superbly. There was talk last week that as Germany began to open up again, that it had spiked again, the virus, and the infection rate had spiked again. How real is that? Has that lasted, or was that just an aberration, a one-off?
No, it obviously that reproduction rate
Yes.
can vary from day to day, and I think that the figures you get, they always go back 10 to 14 days.
Right.
With the incubation time, and no, I think there was a new study this morning. I think we're below 15,000 actively infected people. 150 or 160,000 are cured. So, knowingly with symptoms at the moment, we've got, I think, less than 15,000 people in the country. And obviously, there's always a huge debate. People say, well, the restrictions should last longer. Then there's other people who say, well, we need to ease restrictions even more because we have to look after the economy. And obviously, it's very hard for the politics to find the right balance because you can't weigh up a life, and obviously we have to try to save as many people as possible. At the same time, there could be damage to people as well when they sit at home, especially elderly people who can't see their relatives now for a few weeks and months, and they may die of a broken heart. So politics has to find a balance. I think, as I said, here in Germany they've done a brilliant job. And if it wasn't for the government, there wouldn't have been any football this Saturday. No,
and the significance of the rate being, and Angela Merkel pointed this out last week, if it's below 1, as the Germans had got it, if it's below 1, it's fine. If it goes to 1, it's a problem. If it goes to 1.1, it's a bigger problem. Yeah. If it goes to 1.3, she said, the German health system would be overwhelmed. So we're dealing here in very, very fine margins. Just within the game, I mean, your own view, I think you've expressed. People like Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, did they express views beforehand? And the people you'd respect in German football, what was the breakdown there? Were they mostly all for it, or were there people like in England Frank Lampard, who's someone I would respect, and indeed Sergio Aguero, who were saying no, this isn't really on at the moment?
Yeah, well, it's down to the DFL, the equivalent of the Premier League here in Germany, and the clubs came together about 6-7 weeks ago when we didn't really know whether we play again in 4 weeks, in 4 months, or whether we don't play at all this calendar year. Unanimously, the 18 clubs or the 36 clubs from the first and the second division, because they're part of the DFL, they decided they want to carry on playing whenever it deems safe to play. Again, the structure here and the model is a bit different because we've got a 50+1 rule. We haven't got any private investors who are allowed to have the majority of the shares of a football club. So the clubs are very much dependent on TV revenue. That's not to say they would play to get the money if it's not deemed safe. And again, I think this weekend was a welcome disruption. As I said, there was a poll before the weekend that a lot of people were opposed to it. We showed the conference in the afternoon, the 5 games. We showed it on Sky Sports News on free TV. And we had 4 times the figures. We had over 6 million people watching it.
Wow.
And it just goes to show that polls sometimes can be a bit misleading because, Brexit and Trump never had a majority before the actual election or the referendum.
Yeah.
And I think if you do that poll this week, I think a lot of people hopefully may have changed their mind because, from what I saw, also yesterday's games, it couldn't have gone much better. The way, it was all put in words. It was a theoretical proposal that the DFL put together. But the way the officials, the way the players, the way the referees, the way everybody who's involved executed it was brilliant, and it couldn't have got much better.
Okay, now I watched the first game. It was Dortmund Schalke. It was the game I watched, and It was a very interesting game. It's a local derby, and despite the fact that Dortmund are a much more powerful team than Schalke at the moment, in recent times Schalke had a very good record against them. But Dortmund won 4-0, and we saw, I think, subject to your opinion, Didi, Erling Haaland, who came from Red Bull Salzburg. He's 19 years of age. He's the son of Erling Haaland, who all Roy Keane fans will remember. And he's just a phenomenal player. And would you concur with that? Would you agree with that? And of course, he came and scored the first goal for Dortmund, but he looks a real serious player.
Yeah, I think he scored 9 goals in 8 games now in the league. He's got goals in the Champions League against Paris. I think he got a hat-trick for Salzburg in the first half of the season. He's a young kid. He doesn't think too much. And I think failure is not in his vocabulary.
Yes.
Because he just goes out and he says, give me the ball, and if I do get the ball, I'll score. And he's lethal in front of goal. Again, that finish, he was a bit fortunate because he comes off his calf rather than his foot. But he gets in great position. He's very powerful. He's very quick. And if you speak to defenders from the past or present, what they don't like is big, powerful forwards.
Yes.
Because they can bully you. And what's different with him for a lad who's 6'3", 6'4", he's got huge pace. He's very quick. Once he opens his legs, once he changes gears, he's very hard to stop. So he looks a brilliant prospect. Obviously, with young players, there will be a dip at some stage. How does he cope with it? But he seems a down-to-earth lad. And, I think he's got the world at his feet.
Now, an interesting sidebar to that story of Haaland's rise, rapid rise in football, is that he shares an agent with Paul Pogba. The agent is Raiola, of course, who is regarded as a rogue. And this is very significant, is it not? Manchester United wanted to sign him, and they still want to sign him. But Raiola has stated, because of the bad experience he's had with Manchester United and the Paul Pogba affair, he won't let Haaland go to Manchester United. That's quite extraordinary that one of the richest, most powerful clubs in the world can't get at this player because the agent is in control.
Yeah, well, it's very significant. Again, I think his dad plays a huge role as well. Because obviously he's been a Premier League player. So I think he'll have a pretty big influence on his son as well. But it just goes to show that how far they've really dropped Manchester United, because in years gone by, if you looked at clubs on the continent, where there was France, Italy, Germany, the first port of call you would think would be Manchester United, because they were the biggest club. And obviously with Abramovich's money, Chelsea became a competitor. Liverpool is in a different league now to Manchester United, maybe not financially, but in terms of sports. And the other thing is that, Solskjaer was his manager at Molde. He worked with him. Now, if he hasn't got the pull to say, listen, this is a club for you at the moment, and I agree, I've got to say, I don't agree with Raiola a lot, but in that instance, whether it's got something to do with Pogba or not, I'm not too sure whether that should even come into it. But I don't think Manchester United would have been the right club for him at the moment.
Right.
Because Dortmund showed that they can develop players. They had Dembele, who came here. Nobody really heard of him. He left, I think, 18 months later for 140 million to Barcelona. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. Sancho came here for 7 or 8 million, was shifted out of Manchester City. They gave him the time. He had a bit of a rough start, but now he shows what a brilliant player he is. And Dortmund is really a club in recent years who develop players. They give them time. And they nurture them. And I think that's what he needs. As good as he is now, Haaland, you still need the right treatment. And they're also not afraid of telling people when they cross that line, they shouldn't be crossing. Because Sancho had a couple of disciplinary incidents where he's been late for training, late for a meeting. He's been left out of the team. They actually played Barcelona, I think, last year, where the manager left him out because he was late for a meeting. So they get nurtured, but at the same time they get educated in Dortmund, and I think that's what a young player needs.
And Sancho, just to ask you about Haaland and Sancho, because they're both among the most coveted young players in Europe. Can Dortmund afford to hold on to them, or is it inevitable that these two great young players will go somewhere else?
Well, we've seen in the past that players try to force the move.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I don't think Sancho or Haaland are the type of player.
Right.
We all know that when the Premier League comes calling, it's very hard for the player to turn an offer down, and sometimes for the club as well. But the matter of fact is they both have contracts. I think at least 2-3 years left on their contracts. So Dortmund has to okay any transfer, and I don't think anybody knows at the moment what will happen in the transfer market in the summer. So yeah, I think it's anyone's guess at the moment. But of course, at some stage there will be interest from the Premier League. There's probably already interest for both players, but there's no transfer without Borussia Dortmund, and they will try everything to keep him for at least another year. Yeah, they've got a chance to win the league this season, and I think, as I said, I think it's anyone's guess. But sooner or later, I think if they carry on the way they did in the last 12 to 18 months, it'll be hard to keep them.
Okay, just a couple of other questions I want to ask you, Didi. I saw Bayern Munich secure their win. They were 1-0 up. They went 2-0 up with a couple of minutes to go from a set piece. They were playing Union Berlin. I'm not sure how significant that victory was. Well, it certainly was significant because Bayern are top of the league and Dortmund are chasing them. I want to ask you a question about, two questions. One about before the break and before all of this pandemic arrived, Bayern Munich had come to London twice and hammered Spurs, and they hammered Chelsea as well. I thought they looked a really good team, and they had a real chance of winning the Champions League now that Liverpool are no longer in it. If the Champions League goes on, they have a real chance. I think we spoke about this before. The other question I wanted to ask you, Didi, is this, and it's a more important question in a way, that given the way the world is likely to change, as we learn to live with this deadly virus, it seems to me that the model that the German game has, the 50% plus one, in other words, the fans effectively own the clubs, the scaling down of the excesses, the mad excesses of the Premier League and indeed of PSG and Barcelona and Real Madrid of the past. And Barcelona and Real Madrid are in big trouble. They haven't any money. So there may be a new world where prudence, intelligence, and ethics are more important in soccer than they ever were before. And that may be a good thing for the way the Bundesliga is run. Am I talking pie in the sky, or is there a germ of something in there?
Well, to come back to the first question, I think Munich might be the team to beat. Maybe with Manchester City. I think they've got a brilliant team, Munich. They've got 16, 18 top-class players. They signed the coach, Hansi Flick, who took over a few months back on a long-term contract. They seem a happy camp. Everybody's on their toes. Whoever comes in performs. And I think the Chelsea game was probably even more impressive than Spurs, because Spurs, they could have been 1 or 2 down after 20 minutes, and they just scored the goals at the right time, and they scored 3 or 4 in the last 10 minutes. So I wouldn't read too much into that. At Chelsea, they were absolutely brilliant. Not an easy game. And I think they've got every chance. I think the issue is when you look at a winner, or I know you like a flutter every now and then
you can sing
on the
that.
winner. I think the problem is because we are meant to finish the season now by the end of June. The cup final is scheduled for the 4th of July. Now, if England start, I think there's huge question marks whether whatever happens today, whether they do start mid-June. Now, if England were to start mid-June, they won't finish the season till the end of July, maybe early August.
Yes.
They always said the domestic leagues come first, and then we look at the European competitions. So that would mean that Bayern Munich, if they get to the cup final, they play on July the 4th, and then England finishes the end of July or early August, so that the tournament, if they played in a tournament style, for the Champions League would be probably early to mid-August.
Yes.
So that would mean the team has to stay in training for 4 to 6 weeks
to
play that. I'm not sure you can do that.
No.
Or are they going to play with a team for the next season then? I think there's a lot of question marks. So I think the fact that that other countries are so far behind in terms of playing, so far behind the Bundesliga, I think counts a little bit. If it was played as we would have played it, with fans and obviously we would be close to the final now. I think Munich wouldn't be too far off, and I certainly wouldn't put anybody off backing them because they just look a brilliant team. The second question: will there be a bit more normality, a bit more common sense in football? Well, that's my hope, because, as you say, these excessive agent fees, the wages, the transfer fees. I think football, especially in Germany, they lost touch. The English kind of put up with it. The ticket prices went up, and the people in England are such. They've got such a love for the game. They say, well, if I can't go to the game, I watch it on Sky, I'll watch it somewhere else. I watch it on the telly. But I'm happy that these players play in the Premier League. Here in Germany, it's a bit different, because the social side of things plays a bigger role here. Maybe because the clubs are structured differently. But I'm glad you said this. Is the German model the way forward? Well, in Germany, we've got a discussion now, because if the season hadn't been finished, out of the 36 professional teams in the first and second division, between 15 and 18 would have had serious financial problems, and they wouldn't have been sure whether they could carry on playing.
Yes.
Yeah, for next season. Now, we've got a discussion here now that a lot of people say maybe we should drop that 50+1 rule and give the teams and the clubs a chance to bring foreign investors in. Obviously, exactly the opposite of your thinking, but we just have to wait and see. I don't think it's a discussion for now. I think we have to get over that virus now. Hopefully hopefully we've got the worst behind us now.
Yes.
And then this is a discussion to be had. But I think what we all agree on is that there's got to be more transparency. I think that football is a people's game. And I think we've got to bring the people and the fans on board, because if we lose the fans, if the people turn their backs and they don't go to the stadium anymore, they don't go and watch it at home, football has nothing. Football is nothing without the fans. And I think in recent years we had so many scandals and so many arguments about the way the two last FIFA tournaments, or the last one and the coming one, have been given to these countries. We had that third-party ownership, which has been cancelled now. It's not possible. Up until a few years ago, agents were able to own players and selling them around and make the money of the transfers.
Yes.
It's something, it's just insane. And these are all questions. I think UEFA, FIFA, I think you have to put regulations in. I'm not sure what you can do, because obviously the employees' rights in the European Union are different to the ones in America, where players get drafted left, right, and center. So we need to see what possibilities we've got. But I think what we have to do is to bring football back to where it was, closer to the fan.
And very much part of that is to say at Dortmund, for example. I just want to ask you this one last question. I mean, to go and see Manchester United play would cost you anything. To go and watch Dortmund or Bayern Munich play, I mean, tell me how much it costs.
Well, there's a lot of up until a few years ago, we used to broadcast the games from the grounds, and I saw a lot of English people where there was Frankfurt, Dortmund, because they would take a low airline flight to one of the smaller airports around Dortmund for 20 or 25 quid. They pay 15 or 20 quid for the ticket. Yeah. They get a few beers and they fly back the same evening, or even get a hotel for 30 or 40 quid. So they have a 2-day trip. They see a fantastic game of football. They can have a few pints and probably still pay less or pay the same as if they were to go to Old Trafford and don't eat and don't drink the whole day. And this is one thing we always kept. And I think the German Football League, I think they should pride themselves the way they ran things. Because the thing is, Germans' clubs' hands are tied, because if you want a Sané now from Manchester City, he went for 50 million from Schalke to Manchester City. Yes. Now Bayern Munich is interested. If we hadn't had that pandemic, if we hadn't had the virus, this player would have cost 120 million. Yeah. Now they might get him for a little bit less. Okay. And if you compete with the English clubs, who are financially in a different league to the German clubs, it's very hard, because you need to try to generate money. Yeah, because if you want a top player, who the English clubs are interested in, you've got to pay him pretty much the same wages.
Yes.
Yeah, they probably can't pay them more. Or you say you pay a little bit less, but you're in Munich, you've got a nice city, you've got a good league, you're at a good club. But that doesn't mean the player's going to come. So, we haven't played with the same weapons in football in recent years.
No.
And we've got the financial fair play. I think the UEFA has to be strict on that financial fair play rules, because there are laws, there are things in place in football, but you've got to enforce them, because if there's no sanctions, if you break the rules, then anybody can do what they want, and the bottom line will be that the fans going to turn away.
Okay, Didi, it's a pleasure to talk to you again, and thank you very much for joining us from Germany. Deutschland über alles.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, and we'll talk to you soon, we hope. A great man, Didi Hamann. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Thank you all for listening.